Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. Trump is feeling increasingly uncertain about the trade war with China, and lately he has been saying a lot of pleasant things. According to a report by the American conservative website The Daily Signal on August 31st, Trump once again stated in an interview with them on the 29th that allowing Chinese students to study in the United States is the right thing to do. He explained that the reason is that maintaining friendly relations with other countries is a good thing, especially with nuclear powers. When responding to questions about the policy on Chinese students studying in the US, Trump said that banning Chinese students from coming to the United States would be extremely impolite. He said that such a move would impact America's second-tier universities. Trump also told the Daily Signal's reporter, Reese, that he does not want to see Ivy League schools fall into trouble due to policy changes. According to the report during the interview, Reese asked him, "Would you still allow 600,000 Chinese students to stay here and study?" Trump corrected him, saying it was 600,000 over 2 years. Reese then asked Trump whether this was a negotiation tactic or if he truly believed that such an approach would benefit the United States. Trump responded that when you refuse to accept Chinese students, he believes it is extremely impolite for a country. Accepting them is also beneficial to our education system. When you exclude them, do you know who will be most affected? It's those second-tier universities. The top universities won't be affected, Reese pressed further, asking if this wouldn't affect schools like Harvard. You don't think so? Because when I hear this, I guess conservatives would say, fine, let Harvard, Columbia, and other universities fend for themselves. But you think that refusing Chinese students would impact second-tier schools? Trump said he doesn't want these schools to go under. He also hopes they can become excellent. He emphasized again that refusing Chinese students is extremely rude and it would harm the entire education system. Trump said, "Let me tell you, we have a good relationship with China, and saying we don't want their students is very rude. I think international students are beneficial to all of us." When asked whether he expected any specific returns from allowing Chinese students to come to the United States, Trump replied, "No, yes, I'm not looking for any returns. I just think we're doing the right thing. Getting along well with other countries is a good thing, especially with nuclear-armed countries." However, just before this hour-long interview took place, the US government announced a proposed regulation on the 27th, planning to tighten the visa duration for international students, cultural exchange visitors, and foreign journalists. In the future, holders of these visas will have to apply to extend their stay in the United States. The US Department of Homeland Security claims that this change is intended to better supervise and manage visa holders in the United States. Prior to this, Trump had repeatedly stated that Chinese students are very important to the United States and that without them, the American university system would collapse. On August 25th, Trump said at the White House, "I've heard a lot of stories saying we won't allow Chinese students to enter the country." He said, "In fact, we will allow their students to enter. This is very important. 600,000 students. This is very important. We will get along well with China." However, this statement was soon questioned and criticized by right-wing conservatives within the Make America Great Again camp. As a result, on the 26th, Trump said again at a White House cabinet meeting that not allowing Chinese students to come to the US would be extremely insulting. He said, "I like their students and I like students from other countries as well." He explained, "If they don't do this, do you know what will happen? Our university system would collapse very quickly, and it wouldn't be the top universities, but rather those lower-ranked, struggling schools. Because you would be removing 300,000 or even 600,000 students from the system." He also said that the United States is honored to educate Chinese students, but at the same time emphasized that the US will carefully review and determine who is allowed to come and study. According to analysis by the South China Morning Post, as the United States and China continue to advance trade negotiations, Trump has shifted from his administration's previous high-profile stance of actively revoking Chinese student visas, now stating that accepting Chinese students is very important. However, this statement has caused some dissatisfaction within the MAGA camp and has also exposed internal divisions within his ranks. Trump was previously seen as a hardliner on China, but now his fluctuating China policy has led more and more supporters to feel that he is making dangerous concessions to China. It has become the norm for the US government to say one thing and do another. During Trump's first term, he launched the notorious China Initiative, which resulted in the denial and revocation of visas for many Chinese students and scholars, as well as a series of lawsuits targeting members of the academic community. After returning to the White House, Trump once again targeted Chinese students. In May, U.S. Secretary of State Rubio announced plans to actively revoke Chinese student visas, revise visa application standards, and strengthen the review of all future visa applications from mainland China and Hong Kong. However, in June, after the US and China reached a framework agreement on trade issues, the US temporarily suspended some tariffs and slightly relaxed its stance toward Chinese students. In June, Trump said that he had always strongly supported Chinese students coming to study in the United States. Data shows that the number of Chinese students studying in the US peaked at 373,000 from 2019 to 2022 and then began to decline. According to data from the U.S. State Department in the 2023 to 2024 academic year, more than 277,000 Chinese students were enrolled in U.S. schools, a decrease of 4% compared to the previous year. Meanwhile, India surpassed China with 332,000 students, becoming the largest source country of international students in the United States. An analysis by the National Association of Foreign Student Advisors in the U.S. found that international students studying at American universities contributed $43.8 billion to the U.S. economy in the 2023 to 2024 academic year and provided 378,000 jobs. NBC, citing data, reported that in 2023 alone, Chinese students contributed over $14 billion to the U.S. economy. To summarize a few observations, first, Trump wavers back and forth. On one hand, he is influenced by anti-China sentiment among his supporters, but on the other, when faced with such a powerful rival as China, he has to bow to reality. If the US were to lose Chinese students, the revenues of many American universities would be severely impacted. More importantly, many universities simply would not be able to find research assistants. Chinese international students are well known across the global academic community for being excellent research assistants, so the US cannot afford this loss. Second, in an exclusive interview with conservative media, Trump emphasized one theme: that China is a nuclear power. In doing so, he seems to be trying to persuade his supporters to accept the idea that antagonizing China is not beneficial for the United States. This may mean that going forward, as there is progress in trade negotiations with China, he is first managing the expectations of his supporters. Third, after 2 terms of Trump treating Chinese students harshly, studying in the US is no longer the golden dream for Chinese students, and this will have even more far-reaching consequences for the United States. Because with fewer Chinese elites who have lived in the US, America's influence is effectively weakened. With China's rise, many Western countries have found their influence in developing countries fading. On September 2nd, Vietnam celebrated the 80th anniversary of the August Revolution victory and its National Day. An article published by Reuters on September 1st pointed out that on the 80th anniversary of Vietnam's Declaration of Independence, French influence is still everywhere. But today, Vietnamese people know very little about it. The report also noted that French, once the language of Vietnam's elite, is losing its influence in Vietnam. On September 2nd, 1945, Ho Chi Minh announced the Declaration of Independence at Ba Dinh Square in Hanoi, proclaiming the establishment of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Ba Dinh Square is located in the center of Hanoi. On both sides stand the 2 best-preserved French colonial-era buildings in the Vietnamese capital, which are now the Presidential Palace and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam. Reuters reported that they randomly interviewed 6 Hanoi youths under the age of 30 outside the building of the Vietnamese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and none of them knew the origin of the building. The report said that when they told these young people about the building's French origins, the youths were very surprised. After a long period of confrontation, relations between Vietnam and France have shifted from colonial conflict to friendship. In May of this year, during French President Macron's first visit to Vietnam, the 2 countries signed agreements worth $10 billion, covering aircraft procurement, nuclear energy cooperation, railway projects, Earth observation satellites, and collaboration on the Sanofi vaccine, among other areas. Reuters also noted that during a university event, the fluent French spoken by Vietnamese students greatly delighted Macron. However, the report also pointed out that the number of people in Vietnam who can speak fluent French is decreasing, which reflects the global decline of the French language. According to data from Vietnam's Ministry of Education, this year only 400 Vietnamese high school students chose French as a subject for their graduation exams, while more than 358,000 chose English. It is worth noting that about 4,400 Vietnamese high school students chose Chinese. 25-year-old Vietnamese content creator Hoang Thu Ha said, "If I had to choose, I would rather learn Chinese as my second foreign language instead of French, because Chinese feels more familiar and China is our neighboring country." The choices of young people in Vietnam also reflect that Europe, represented by France, is gradually fading from the ranks of the world's leading nations. When young people choose a second language to learn, it represents the object of their aspirations and admiration. Therefore, the fact that young Vietnamese would rather learn Chinese than French shows a shift in the status of China and France in their minds.